Hello and welcome to Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. I'm Erin Popelka, and I'm delighted to be here today with author Jennifer Dupee. Welcome.
Thanks, Erin. I'm so excited to be here.
Truly my pleasure. Jennifer Dupee grew up on the North Shore of Boston near the seaside communities of Manchester by the Sea and Beverly Farms. She is a graduate of Brown University and received her honors in creative writing. Jennifer is an active member of the Grub Street writing community in Boston and has published in the feminist press. The Little French Bridal Shop, this beautiful book I have in my hands, is her first novel, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So, Jennifer, please do tell me about the Little French Bridal Shop.
So the story is set in motion when Larissa Pearl returns to her small seaside hometown, not unlike the town that I grew up near, upon the death of her great aunt Ursula. And she's a bit of an emotional mess. She's just lost her job and she's broken up with her boyfriend and she's struggling with her mother's failing health. And on a whim, she wanders into the local bridal shop and ends up buying a dress, even though she has no groom. So soon word spreads all over town that she's getting married. And rather do anything to dispel the rumor, she instead perpetuates it. And kind of small town chaos ensues.
Yes, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And certainly, like, a small town is the perfect breeding ground for that sort of like intrigue and incitement. And like, what would be sort of like an expensive like whim in the city becomes like all of the conversation in a small town with Larissa's decision there. How did it feel like to write a small town?
Oh, it was great. I grew up, as I said, on the North Shore, as you said, really, in your intro, on the North Shore of Boston. And my grandmother lived for many years in this small town called Beverly Farms, which is next to Manchester by the Sea of Manchester by the Sea of the movie fame. And so it was a town that was really deeply ingrained in my psyche, and it felt really natural for me to write about it. And it felt really fun to kind of have this insular environment where I could, subject my characters to this bubble where all of their decisions are amplified and gossiped about and assumptions are made, and it was really fun.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. And you also talked about in the premise of the book that, Larissa's mother in the book is struggling with her health and she's struggling with dementia. And I'm really curious about if you could tell me a little bit more about this choice, and it has a big impact on Larissa. And what did it feel like to write about dementia in the place, alongside a mother-daughter relationship?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So early on in the writing drafts, Larissa's in the house that she's inherited, and she's there seems to be a leak, and she kind of again whimsically, impulsively is the word I'm looking for, takes a crowbar to the wallpaper in the house to try to get at the leak. And it's a bit of a like gut decision, and she's kind of not herself. And I realized that she wasn't herself in part because of her mother's failing health. And this was a feeling that I really identified with, actually, because it was the same sort of feeling I felt when I was 24 and my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I wanted to really explore the feelings of loss of identity and kind of confusion and disorientation that occurs when you become a caretaker, especially a child, even an adult child who becomes a caretaker of an ailing parent. There's such a kind of severe role reversal that happens. And even if you're an adult and you're functioning, of course, you're on your own, the feeling of taking care of a parent is a really specific one. And as I said, I wanted to explore this loss of identity, and I picked dementia kind of as the disease uh, because it amplified this theme of loss of identity. Obviously, because the person suffering from dementia has a loss of identity, but then also the caretaker has this loss of identity, and that's what I was hoping to explore. So it was quite interesting, and I did a lot of research on dementia because I don't have direct experience with it. And in initial drafts of the book, I really referred to it as full on Alzheimer's. But I felt like because I was exploring Larissa, the daughter's experience, and not the mother's experience, I wanted to dial it back a little bit. And also, I'm not an expert on Alzheimer's, so I didn't want to present it as though I really had kind of first-hand experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. Dementia and this loss of memory and this loss of identity is, of course, like very profound for the patient. And it's also very profound, like you said, for the caretaker, for Larissa in the book, because you're getting erased too, that all of a sudden you don't exist as your mother's daughter anymore as the disease takes its toll.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And how she's feeling in the book, there's a line where she sort of thinks, when one of the beacons by which you define yourself, so parents, it helps you kind of define yourself. When one of them is no longer there, who am I then? And she's really exploring that question in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you just have to take that out on a wall because that's the place you can do it, right?
Exactly. Oh, and I brought a little prop to show you. So,
Oh, please.
when I was writing this book, I took a writing weekend on an inn on the North Shore of Boston in a little town, seaside town, also a seaside town called Rockport, Massachusetts. And I was about to kind of settle into some writing, but I kept being distracted by the wallpaper. So the very, omnipresent wallpaper of pheasants kind of looking backwards over their shoulder at each other. And I couldn't stop laughing when I looked at the wallpaper, and I couldn't stop looking. And so I started to write the wallpaper into the book. And then, flash forward to several months later where I was really kind of, revising the scene and kind of getting into the nitty gritty. And I realized, oh my God, I forgot to take a photo of the wallpaper. And of course, writers were obsessive people, and we need to kind of have our moments of inspiration near to us. And so I called the inn and I said, can you just snap a photo of the wallpaper? And they said, well, actually, that room is under renovation and we've taken down the wallpaper, but we have rolls of it. And if you'd like to come and get some of the wallpaper, we'd be happy to give it to you. So, of course, I was in my car in like 2 seconds. And I then had a piece of the wallpaper that I could use for inspiration going forward. And so this is the pheasant wallpaper. And if you can imagine, many of them kind of up the wall staring at each other. It was,
Oh, yes. I mean, I can feel the inspiration through the computer screen, like that rich blue, and the pheasant just sort of pops. And I live on the other side of the country, and we have ring-necked pheasants, and they're such like big, colorful, majestic birds. They're always a surprise. I can totally see how that lit up your inspiration.
yeah, so that was a really fun part of
Oh, so
project.
great, so great. And that, of course, was one historic house. And I know that you are also a big fan of historic houses. I
I
can
am.
see the beautiful built-in bookcases behind you and your gorgeous
Yep.
window. Tell me a little bit more about your love of old houses and what it felt like to write Elmhurst, which is the old historic house in the book.
Yeah. So, I've always had a love of old houses and just sort of house renovation. And I just, there's something about the old bones and the old details that just really, appeals to me. And it's interesting. When I first started writing the book, my husband and I had started dating. I hadn't started yet, actually. We were dating. And I realized that he had a love of old houses as well. And we used to take walks down this street called Elmhurst Road where we used to live. And we admired a historic house there and kind of pretended like, oh, what if we had that house? So I started the book, and in tribute to this house on Elmhurst Road, I named the house in my book Elmhurst, just to kind of give it a nod. And even though the house in the book looked quite different than the house on Elmhurst Road, I felt like there was sort of a kinship between the two. And then, as I was into the book, several years later, the house actually went on the market, and we were like, "Oh my God, we could get this house!" So, spoiler alert, we didn't get the house. But there were 10 other offers or something, and so it was hugely competitive, and we didn't quite get there, and we were heartbroken, honestly. But the story has a good ending in that after I finished the first draft of this book, we actually bid on a different historic house. So several years later, and we were able to land that house, and that's where we are today. So super exciting, and a super fun kind of just highlight of writing the book.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I imagine too, like writing a historic house is probably a lot better than owning one because when you write one and the pipes break or you send a crowbar through the wall, it's a little easier to fix. You don't have to call the contractors. You just have to keep writing and fix it, kind of through the book. So
No, absolutely. And luckily, knock on wood, we've done some renovation in this house, but we haven't had, anything super major. So yeah,
I hope it stays that way. Fingers and toes crossed.
fingers crossed for sure.
Indeed. And actually, as we're talking too, I'm also seeing all of the different layers, even too, between kind of the dementia and the houses, because with houses, you, especially historic houses, you have these like layers of the people who have lived there. You know,
Yes,
you can
yes.
see it like in the layers of the wallpaper and the layers of the repairs. And it's almost
Mhm.
the same with memory, right? There are these layers of memories as we experience things. So I imagine like there's a beautiful play that is there as well.
Yes, no, exactly. There's a line in the book, obviously I'm not going to quote it verbatim here, but by the male character of the book where, so he's the caretaker of the house. So he has many, many years of memories from the house, and he's quite fond of Aunt Ursula, who is no longer alive actually during the action of the book, but she's really like an omnipresent character in the book because she's just a strong character in both Larissa and this male character Jack's life. And he has a line where he says something about, we're we're keeper of each other's memories, and the house kind of is a physical kind of keeper of the memories, right? There are physical markings of the people who've lived here, but we as people in each other's lives, when we have those of us are failing, we then become the keeper of those memories, and the keeper of the lives that we were lucky enough to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also seeing the parallels too between like as a reader, right? Like, by you writing The Little French Bridal Shop, me as a reader, I get to be the keeper of the story too. And so as this book
Oh, I
goes out
love
into the
that.
world,
Yeah.
like we're also the holders of the story that you so kindly created for us. So
Oh, I
the
love that.
ripples extend. Yes. So, you also are part of the Grub Street writers community. And I wanted to take a minute and talk about this because I know that like writing and reading is often a really introverted act. And so it's so nice to have community and people along the way. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how that community was part of the writing of the Little French Bridal Shop and how you've been hanging in there with COVID.
Yeah, great question. So Grub Street is amazing. So Grub Street is a writing community in Boston. I've been part of their community since I want to say 2003, so a long, long time. And I met my writing group there. So we meet every 2 weeks. We used to meet in person, and we got to share food and drink, and so that's a bummer. But we have maintained our schedule more or less over Zoom, and so they've just been integral to my work, and their critique and their input has just been amazing and really immeasurable in the kind of amount that it's added to my work. And then Grub Street itself just has a huge membership that has grown a lot over the years, and they offer workshops, so both sort of 1 to 2 day workshops over the weekend, or they offer weeks long classes like 6 stories in 6 weeks, or 6 poems in 6 weeks, or you know, um, structuring kind of the arc of your novel, or they even have year-long classes that you apply to. So there's a novel incubator class where people submit their manuscript, and they're accepted. And full clarity, you have to pay for it, but you have the benefit of having your novel workshopped by 11 other novelists, and you workshop it together with a wonderful instructor. And so that's an amazing thing as well. And they've managed to pivot quite well to online. So I've still been heavily involved in their community, even though everything has shifted to online. And as far as COVID goes, obviously it's been it was a scramble, especially in the beginning, to kind of balance work and home, because I do work full time, and transitioning to online, and also dealing with childcare. So I have a 7-year-old daughter. Um, but we have been so lucky. I feel like I can't complain. We feel so lucky that we have our house, our jobs, our health, and we have a really wonderful neighborhood that we've actually gotten to enjoy, more than we have in past years. So, my heart goes out to people who have really suffered through this horrible disease and pandemic, and hopefully we'll emerge from it. We're emerging, so hopefully we'll continue to emerge on a good path forward. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you have lots to be grateful for, that yes, you have your health, you have income, that you've gotten to spend a little bit more time in that beautiful house that you have. I have also been equally but blessed, kind of, yes, with good steady employment, like a safe place to stay. And so that has been an incredible blessing. But I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of suffering, and my heart goes out. And yeah, I'm glad we can kind of have each other to sort of get through this moment.
That's the
Yeah,
key. That's the
yeah.
key, really. Yeah.
Yep. And you did mention that like there was this pivot to online, and I saw on your website that you also do book club visits. And so now we're in this world where like we're all a little bit better at Skype and Zoom and these online platforms. So I'd love to hear a little bit more as my last question for you. Tell me, what conversations are you hoping to have with book clubs about the Little French Bridal Shop?
Yeah, great question. So I am so open to partnering with book clubs. I'd love to visit your book club. So reach out to me on my website. That would be great. Um, so I can tell you more about the pheasant wallpaper. I have a larger piece of it that would be really fun to share because it actually looks different when you see it, just the kind of the one-off versus the larger. And then also there's a really cool plant in the book that I'd love to tell you about. So it's a plant called the night blooming cereus. And I have some slides that I can share about it. But basically it's a plant that's in the cactus family. And I knew about it from my in-laws, and my mother-in-law has them, and she gave us a cutting, and we had it for a number of years. It did nothing. It can go for like 6 or 7 years and produce no blooms, etc. And then guess what? This past fall we actually got a bloom. And what happens is it will start, and then on the morning when it's going to open, it will start sort of early in the morning, 9 in the morning, and then it will gradually open, and it spends all day opening. And so we were able to kind of film this in stop time video, and by the end of the day, so really like end of the day, like 11:30 at night, it becomes this big 10-inch bloom, and this white flower, and it's very aromatic, so it has this wonderful sort of jasmine honey smell that just infuses the room, and it's amazing. And then though, by the end of the night, it drops off and the bloom is over and it's done. So it's kind of this really amazing flower, night blooming, 1-day bloom that comes and goes. And we're hoping this year maybe we'll get a couple blooms on our plant, but we'll see.
Yes, fingers crossed. Oh, what a fantastic story. And certainly lots of conversation. I know that there's lots of readers who are also gardeners and really into plants.
Totally.
And so I could definitely
Yeah.
see the overlap there. Oh, well, fantastic. Well, fantastic. Well, must readers, if you're watching and have a book club and want to have Jennifer Dupee to your book club, she is open to it. And Jennifer Dupee, thank you. Thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with me, for writing this wonderful book, The Little French Bridal Shop. And yeah, for your time today. This has been such a pleasure.
Erin, it's been an absolute pleasure on my end as well.